Ugh, so they really doing this, huh? What's good? It's Woog. I'm not gonna do this Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson like a typical breakdown. Although I'll give you their boxing records. Jake Paul, 10 wins, 1 loss. We got Mike Tyson, 50 wins, 6 losses, and 2 no contests. This fight is taking place on a Friday. This is November 15th, again, a Friday. And the undercard is actually pretty good. You've got the rematch between Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano. You've got Bruce Shushu Carrington, the top rank prospect contender featherweight. You've got Mario Barrios versus Abel Ramos. That should be a pretty good welterweight fight. But the mega attraction here is obviously Jake Paul versus the legend Mike Tyson. This fight is taking place at AT&T Stadium and it's going to be on Netflix. This is very unusual for boxing, but this is taking place on Netflix, so you don't have to pay a huge pay-per-view fee. The idea is that everyone, whether you like this matchup or not, whether you're really a fight fan or not, everyone is going to be watching this fight. That's the idea, at least. And look, I hate to be the boomer in the room, but this fight is a little bit gross, isn't it? Like, I've been a huge boxing fan for years. Look, I've been a UFC fan since like UFC 2. I'm talking like 1994. I really became a boxing fan, I would say, in the early to mid 90s. We're talking like Riddick Bowe versus Evander Holyfield fights, and Roy Jones versus, James Toney, and Julio Cesar Chavez versus Hector Camacho, and then Chavez versus Pernell Sweepy Whitaker. So around that era is when my consciousness started to kind of get excited about boxing fights and watching them, kind of having a better understanding of what I was watching. And, I've studied the hell out of Mike Tyson's career, beginning to end. I can't look at this fight between Jake Paul and Mike Tyson without just the first thing that comes to mind. We've got a 20-something-year-old against a 58-year-old. I can't get around that. And look, there's this thing with Mike Tyson. It's weird because he had his last professional fight against Kevin McBride in 2005. Before that, versus Danny Williams, 2004. So we're talking 18, 19 years ago. He got stopped in both of those fights, and those weren't like elite heavyweight opponents. And we're talking like 6th round stoppage, 4th round stoppage. Mike Tyson hasn't been a good heavyweight fighter for like 2 decades, basically. And he's done interviews on how different he is just psychologically, where he's not even in the mindset of being that same guy who was one of the most vicious fighters in boxing history, and really one of the greatest and biggest celebrities in not only combat sports history, but in sports history. Like, I would say in boxing, maybe aside from Muhammad Ali, he might be the biggest name in boxing history. And I'm talking about today. Like, I don't think necessarily, the biggest name in the sport, Canelo Alvarez, is a bigger celebrity today in 2024 than Mike Tyson. So it's been this inexplicable phenomenon that emerged in the mid to late 1980s and really hasn't relented since. I mean, the story of Mike Tyson has been a roller coaster, taking all kinds of treacherous twists and turns. And I'm just happy that the guy, one, is still alive, and that from a business standpoint, because how, he reportedly got jerked for his money earlier in his career. I'm glad that he appears to be thriving financially and that he appears to be happy life-wise. I'm happy for his sake, because to be honest, like by the late 90s to the early to mid 2000s, I wasn't sure how that story was going to play out. So I don't want to take that for granted. And the reason that this fight is happening is because Jake Paul is one of the biggest names in sports and entertainment, and Mike Tyson is Mike Tyson. But with Mike Tyson, there's this, the public's appetite for Mike Tyson is such that there's this suspended belief, no matter how pedestrian he looked or how bad he looked in his last performance, or in the Roy Jones fight in 2020, was it late 2020? I think. I know that most people who saw that feel like Mike Tyson won. I know they called it a draw, but Mike Tyson was totally controlling the action in that one. But you had old man against old man in that one, with all respect to both guys. Roy Jones was one of my favorite fighters in the 90s. I don't know if I've seen as talented a fighter since. And notice I said talent and not great resume, great career, and so forth. Although if Roy Jones retired after the first Harvard fight and didn't suffer numerous knockouts, we would have a different look on Roy Jones' career as a whole, especially after he grabbed a heavyweight title. But there's this thing with Mike Tyson where no matter how bad he looked, the public still has this little shred of hope that Iron Mike Tyson, vintage Mike Tyson is gonna resurface somehow. I don't get it. I can't explain it. It's almost like if Michael Jordan was to rejoin the NBA today, somebody believing that he's gonna look like the Michael Jordan who was pumping his fist against the Cleveland Cavaliers back in the 80s. They think that the Air Jordan is gonna return. Like, I'm talking with friends and family members about, and boxing enthusiasts about Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson, and some people still, think that Mike Tyson has any business competing in a fight where the guys are punching each other. Like, I know that the idea is that if anybody deserves or belongs in a ring and throwing his hands, it's the great Mike Tyson. But biology is biology, and yes, I have been watching those clips of Mike Tyson, but do you notice something about all of these Mike Tyson clips? They're all like 2 to 5 seconds, and they're spliced up in an edited way where he's looking like an absolute savage in a 30-second to 1-minute montage, but each one of those little clips is 2 to 5 seconds. Yo, anyone who's got any experience working out, putting gloves on and throwing punches at bags, whatever you're trying to do, exercise or workout wise, you could go on a big jog. The first 30 seconds to 2 to 3 to 4 minutes of your workout, anybody could look like a savage. Anybody could look at least fairly impressive in short clips. I need to see more footage. I need to see what that workout looked like 5 minutes down the road. I need to see some extended footage, not like spliced up where I get 5 seconds here, 5 seconds there. I want to see what Mike Tyson looks like when he's moving, throwing punches, moving his head, moving his legs, which I'm going to get back to the feet and balance part of this thing and what that means for a 58-year-old. But I need to see Tyson clips where it's an elongated period, at least 45 seconds to a minute and a half of sustained activity. And I need to see what the last few seconds of that stretch of activity looks like before you can even come close to convincing me that he's got any business in a boxing ring. And this fight, by the way, is 8 2-minute rounds, and I do think that the 2-minute rounds might be Mike Tyson's saving grace here, but it's 8 2-minute rounds with 14-ounce gloves. But it's really truly unbelievable that this many people still think, hey, maybe Mike Tyson still has something left in the bag. I'm like, yo, did you not see footage of him walking around in the streets with a cane, And I know that people think that, well, if any 58-year-old can do it, it's Mike Tyson. I'm thinking, no, I actually think that maybe because he had a fight career that his body and his preservation isn't going to be as good and as healthy as somebody who just, did some mild workouts and just kind of had more of a balance in their 30s and 40s and, continued to exercise, but didn't, keep their foot on the gas too hard and are still able to, run several miles, without a problem. People, even in their 60s, I think might physically age better than Mike Tyson. Again, I know I've seen those clips too. And yes, sometimes in those clips, his legs still look athletic and his head movement still looks ferocious and his punches look fierce. I get that. I'm just thinking like, yo, fool me once. You know how the saying goes? But again, because it's Mike Tyson, you've got this wave of enthusiasm, at least some enthusiasm for this Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson fight. And we know the Jake Paul story. He was a Disney kid, a child actor. Nobody even knew that he, was an athlete, let alone somebody who had the potential of being a fighter. I'm convinced that he's been working his butt off training wise for like the past 5 years now, ever since around the time he had his first fight against Anderson Gibb, even though before that he, stopped Deji in 5 rounds in 2018. So I think he's been training really for like at least the past 6 years. And I think he's been training very diligently. You see him putting his skills together. You see him building a jab, building a left hook. He had the right hand to begin with. That right hand has been his signature, right? That's the one that he sunk Nate Robinson, dropped Ben Askren, flattened Tyron Woodley with, right? But then we started seeing him drop Nate Diaz with other punches. And it went from, okay, you're fighting Anderson Gibb, another YouTuber, to you're fighting Nate Robinson, an athlete, but not a fighter, and a small athlete, right? He won 3 like slam dunk contests, but the attraction was that he was under 6 feet and he could just just take off like a rocket ship. So a lot of people thought, well, now Jake Paul's fighting an athlete, a pro athlete. Nate Robinson might take Jake Paul's head off, but it wasn't the case. This ended up being a scary knockout. And then he fought Ben Askren, a fighter, former UFC fighter, Bellator fighter. He was a champion at Bellator and at the One organization. Again, a fighter, but a wrestler by trade, not a striker. And he got knocked out in the first round by Jake Paul. And then it was the 2 fights against Tyron Woodley. The first fight was a close fight that Jake Paul won via decision. That was the first time Jake Paul went the distance. Split decision win for him. And Woodley, unlike Askren, was yes, he was a wrestler too, but he was a talented striker in the UFC when he was UFC champion at 170. He had several successful title defenses of that belt. To me, he's one of the probably top 5 170 pounders welterweight in the UFC, top 5 170 pounders in UFC history. I look at Tyron Woodley as being that good. And in that rematch, Tyron Woodley in the 6th round got knocked out viciously, scary knockout. To see Tyron Woodley get flattened face first in that manner by Jake Paul, that was the first one. Well, no, I had that feeling in my stomach watching Nate Robinson get flattened. Like, maybe Nate Robinson didn't know how serious Jake Paul takes this fighting stuff, right? But with Tyron Woodley, it was jarring because even in the UFC, this guy fought guys like Robbie Lawler. Tyron Woodley, I never saw him get knocked out like that in the UFC. When he was getting stopped, he like hurt his rib against Colby Covington. Tyron Woodley didn't get stopped a lot. So when he lost his title to Kamaru Usman, it was a decision loss. And his next loss was a decision loss. Tyron Woodley wasn't getting blasted out in the way that he got blasted out by Jake Paul. So that one was a bit weird. And then the Anderson Silva fight. Anderson Silva was in his upper 40s. And Anderson Silva, I believe, is the greatest striker in MMA history. Just the creativity, the way he was stopping his opponents. Look at the length of his title reign, how many title defenses. To me, Anderson Silva is probably the 2nd best MMA fighter of all time. I look at John Jones as being the first, but Anderson Silva and GSP, I get he's got a top 2, top 1 argument as well. Those 3 guys, you could argue you could put them in any order. I put them in Jones, Silva, GSP, but Anderson Silva, not necessarily just strictly power wise. He's not like Francis Ngannou per punch, but total package striking. Anderson Silva was incredible. And he had some like heroic submission finishes as well. Like when he retained his title in the last minute of the last round against Chael Sonnen, a fight that he was losing every round in. Anderson Silva is a legendary MMA fighter. And that one felt weird because I'm like, Anderson Silva, he did beat Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. somehow in a boxing match, which is a total embarrassment for Chavez Jr. I mean, come on, how bad is that? But Anderson Silva won that fight against Chavez Jr. via decision. So I'm thinking maybe Anderson Silva can handle Jake Paul. And unlike Tyron Woodley and Ben Askren and Nate Robinson, at least Anderson Silva fought at 185, not 170, but 185. And Jake Paul is, about a cruiserweight size. Like, I don't think Jake Paul could ever make like the light heavyweight 175-pound limit. But Jake Paul beat Anderson Silva and he dropped him in the last round. He beat Silva by unanimous decision. That one felt a little bit gross too, but it was a competitive fight. Anderson Silva comported himself well and he made it the distance. At least I didn't see Anderson Silva get his lights put out by Jake Paul. Then Jake Paul had the split decision loss to Tommy Fury, who moved well, jabbed well, and it looked like, okay, now you look like you're at least fighting a lower level professional boxer. Tommy Fury looked pretty good in that ring, and I thought that he edged Jake Paul in that fight, even if Jake Paul started to rally back. So that's Jake Paul's one loss. Then he beats Nate Diaz via unanimous decision, drops him multiple times in that fight. Then he fights 2 low-level but pro boxers with amateur boxing careers and professional records, Andre August and Ryan Borland. He knocked them both out in the first round, one with an uppercut and the other Ryan Borland just looked bad. He was just kind of swarming Borland, and Borland didn't need to be in there. But he knocked both of the low-level boxers because a lot of people want to see, like, well, can he do that against a boxer? Well, he's fought a couple low-level boxers. No, the public didn't want to see it. These were probably 2 of his least viewed fights. You had to be paying attention to, some of the lesser DAZN cards. This wasn't like a major deal. It was almost like, oh, Jake Paul's fighting tomorrow? Okay. So it wasn't like an extravaganza, but again, Jake Paul won those fights. Say what you want about the level of boxing opponent, but It was two boxers, knocked them both out in the first round. And there's something to said about having the ability to just knock people out, not only win, but to set them up and put them out. Like, he started, again, this was an uppercut, I believe, that he hit Andre August with. He's setting his power punches up. And then in his next fight, which was kind of a makeup for Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson being postponed because of the ulcer that was discovered within Mike Tyson after he had a medical scare on a flight. The fight was postponed, and it had a lot of other people saying, yeah, I don't know if Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson should be happening. See, I don't think the fight should be happening, but not because of any ulcer or anything that's internal, medically or sick related. I'm just thinking physically. I'm talking about like, motor skills, your ability to move, not like what's going on like intestinally or anything like that, even though those are big concerns. I'm looking just like from a more practical standpoint, like, when you start to age, and now I'm getting into really the reason why I don't think this should happen, let alone like just getting hit in the head when you're in your late 50s. He's 58 versus when you're in your 20s. I mean, getting hit in the head to begin with isn't good for anybody, right? But you're 58 years old. You've been out of the ring for so long. You haven't been taking headshots, and throughout your career, you took headshots, and you're fortunate enough to have made it out of there to be able to establish a great career, a great businesses, make a lot of money, enjoy your family. You made it out the game. And you had this rough stretch of your life. I mean, more rough stretches than non-rough stretches. And you made it out like this. You're a beloved figure. Whenever Mike Tyson is at a fight, I don't care what the event is, they flash to the crowd. They got this celebrity. They got Mark Wahlberg. They've got a current champion here, a current fighter here, a former legend here, Roberto Duran here. Whenever they flash to Mike Tyson, he gets the biggest applause out of anybody in any event. He is that beloved a figure. And now you're gonna go back into the ring and fight this YouTuber turned pretty credible. Look, he's not a great professional boxer. Jake Paul is not. I'm curious to see what he's going to do after this payday. If he's going to if he's going to go back to fighting, lower level pros and try to eventually earn a belt, which he said he wants to do. He also said he wants to fight Canelo, but he said he wants to become a champion one day. And I'm starting to think maybe a cruiserweight belt isn't totally out of the question, but that's another conversation for another day. This would have sounded absolutely insane a couple of years ago, and it might sound insane right now, but I'm just saying, I've seen a lot of development in Jake Paul's abilities over the past 3 to 4 years. This is just what my eyes are telling me. And I know he's fighting Mike Perry, which again was a substitute for Mike Tyson, and he's not fighting, Zurdo Ramirez or people like that. So in Jake Paul's most recent fight, he knocked out Mike Perry in the 6th round, dropped him several times. Mike Perry was a 170, another smaller UFC fighter, but this was seen to be a risky fight because Mike Perry's, he's got that dog and he's got some hands, at least from or by MMA standards, but he didn't need to be boxing Jake Paul. He didn't know how to move his head out of the way from hard jabs. And so he was just trying to walk Jake Paul down. He just started running into too many shots, and he took a real big beating in that one. So yeah, Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson. I get why it's a thing. I get why people are excited. I get why why it's happening. The money is almost too big to ignore. Like on this whole magic carpet ride that Jake Paul's been on, right? Where you're increasing the level of talent that you're fighting against, increasing the level of name that you're fighting against. You start beating this guy, then beating this guy. Pretty much the final boss in this whole celebrity boxing. Mike Tyson is the final boss, not from a can I beat him standpoint, but just from a how much money can we collectively make in this event standpoint. So that's why this is happening. It's on Netflix, but when you see somebody age, and this goes for any sport, the legs is what they say is the first to go. Well, they say either reflexes or legs. Now, if you're in a workout and in a sustained workout, just go like this. Dip your head in like a U shape and then throw punches. Like go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then throw 10 punches, like, each hand. Then go back to 1 and do the standing up. Do it where after every dip followed by the punches, you take steps this way, take steps this way, take steps backing up, take steps coming forward, and then do the same thing. See how long you last before you've got your hands on your knees or you just want to stop doing it. It's not easy. Your lower back starts to tighten up, your feet and your ankles, and if you have any lingering injuries, you start feeling those as well. And Mike Tyson has had injuries, but even more basic than that, the balance isn't what it was. I don't care who you are. Like, remember when Devin Haney, you know, was about to fight Lomachenko and he gave him that hard shove when they were nose to nose, boom, hard shove. What did you notice? You know, I was wondering, is Lomachenko going to suffer whiplash because of the way that his head jerked from that super hard shove? But Lomachenko, sturdy neck, robust build, stayed on his feet, just took a couple steps back. He did move back. I mean, it was a hard shove. You weren't going to not fly back, but he stayed on his feet. If Devin Haney would have pushed Mike Tyson like that, or any 58-year-old, that 58-year-old is toppling over. You just don't have the balance to be able to step back and catch yourself. People start injuring themselves when their feet are moving quicker than their brain thought that their feet would have to move. That's the type of thing that we're talking about. It's neurological, it's biological. I mean, did you see Vitor Belfort versus Evander Holyfield? Evander Holyfield is a gym rat. He is the gym rat. He's going to be in the gym, I'm sure, when he's 70. But when he was in the ring against Vitor Belfort, it was hard to watch because he wasn't even getting necessarily hit by clean shots. At least it didn't look like he was getting hit by clean shots. It looked like he was missing when he was throwing, and he was missing so badly that he was tumbling over onto the canvas, into the ropes. It looked embarrassing. I felt bad watching that fight. It felt nasty watching that fight. And again, this is a revered legend in Evander Holyfield against a talented UFC striker, very talented, fast hands. Vitor Belfort, look at when he stormed the gates at the UFC when he fought Tank Abbott back in the early or mid 90s. Check Vitor Belfort versus Tank Abbott out. That's what Vitor Belfort's hand speed was looking like. And he had hand speed throughout his career. He had hand speed when he fought John Jones in the early to mid 2010s. So I don't think Mike Tyson has balance. And I'm just wondering, how is he going to react to even getting jabbed, eating a clean jab? How is he going to pursue Jake Paul as the fight continues? So what I expect to see between these two, and look, this might be the only fight that I kind of hope or wish a fix is in. Not a fix that says, hey, you go down and act like you're knocked out. Not a fix like that, but hey, let's kind of agree not to go too hard at each other and hurt each other. This is the one fight I wouldn't be mad at that. This isn't a pay-per-view, so you're not taking the public's money. You're just taking their time, the time that it takes to watch this, and everybody could just walk away like, and then just let it be that. I wouldn't be mad at that. But if they're actually really going to go at it, the way I see it playing out is Jake Paul, I don't think he's just going to storm Mike Tyson, even though it would be something if he just comes at Mike Tyson in the center of the ring and just decks the old man. I hate to put it in those terms, but that is what it's a 20-something-year-old against a 50-something-year-old. If you were to take a 58-year-old former NBA player, put him up against a good, D1 high school, not even college, but a high school player, it would look like it's a teenager, an athletic teenager going against a 58-year-old, going against a damn near senior citizen. That's really what's happening here, guys. And yes, Mike Tyson's got a shot in the dark at scoring a knockout. He probably is still heavy-handed. So if Jake Paul just walks into something, or if Mike Tyson somehow, is able to trick him with some setup and decks Jake Paul, yes, he can hurt and even drop Jake Paul. But like, I was talking with my dad the other day, and he was bringing up like the idea that I don't even know that Mike Tyson today is the harder puncher between the two. I know they say power is the last to go, but power comes from balance largely. It comes from a lot of things, but it comes largely from your balance, your core, your center of gravity, all kinds of things related to your feet, your legs, your core, and your balance. If you don't have that, you're kind of arm punching. Yes, you can still put your hips into something. You can't turn your hips the way that baseball players who've been taking swings for the past 20 something years, their hips don't work in their 50s in the way that it did in their 20s. So Mike Tyson, I don't even think gets the same torque when he's throwing his punches. I know that those clips look scintillating, but let's be realistic here. So I think Jake Paul is going to be a bit cautious. I think Mike Tyson will be dangerous for the first minute and a half of the first round, maybe the first minute of the second round. And then it's going to look like an old man. He's going to look like somebody who can't move that well, who can't avoid punches, who's a little bit too tired to keep moving his head. And yes, he did keep on walking forward on Roy Jones. And, he went to the body. They were clinching a lot, but it was Mike Tyson pushing the action in that fight. But at this stage, Jake Paul is able to actually move around better than Roy Jones. I know it sounds crazy to hear that. It feels crazy for me to say that, but Jake Paul is going to have the hand speed advantage, at least after the first couple minutes of the first couple rounds. So hand speed advantage, I don't know who's got the power advantage. Let's give that to Mike Tyson. But mobility, chin, I know Mike Tyson's got a pretty good chin, but again, 58 years old. I don't expect much in the chin department. I don't. And in the volume department, I think Jake Paul can throw more punches over the course of more rounds than Mike Tyson. So do you really expect Mike Tyson to be coming in like moving his feet in order to close the distance like that in the 6th round, 5th round? No, I give Mike Tyson a couple rounds to get the job done. After that, I think it's pretty much going to be all Jake Paul, and I feel like it's going to be up to Jake Paul to either make this a boring fight or to put Mike Tyson away. I really look at it. I look at it as being that black and white. Tyson dangerous for the first couple rounds, and then he's a sitting duck. That's how I feel about this one. Let me know your thoughts. And if he's not a sitting duck, then it's because thankfully this fight either isn't on the up and up and they're agreeing not to hurt each other, or Jake Paul is having some compassion. But I could see Jake Paul leaning into the villain role if he really wants to and putting the beloved legend away. I don't know how I would handle seeing an unconscious Mike Tyson against Jake Paul. I really hope it's not that. I hope that if anything, it's Mike Tyson kind of slipping around like Evander Holyfield was against Vitor Belfort, and the ref jumping in like, yo, let's that's enough. I hope it's something more like that. I don't want it to be Jake Paul jabbing to the body, then coming up top with the right hand, Mike Tyson getting caught cleanly, and then flat on his back. I really don't want that to happen. Obviously, if Mike Tyson is able to pull a rabbit out of his hat and drop and even stop Jake Paul, incredible. Okay, that makes the night worth it, right? So there is that little shred of hope. I don't think it's going to happen though. I'm going Jake Paul, and I don't see this going the full 8 rounds unless Jake Paul makes this like it is possible that Mike Tyson still appears dangerous and Jake Paul makes a decision to just kind of jab and back away and make this a boring kind of exhibition looking fight. That is possible. So in that way, it can go 8 rounds. But if these guys are fighting each other, I don't think this goes 8 rounds. And I'm going to go Jake Paul with some sort of a stoppage. I don't know what. I'm hoping for the least devastating outcome, but I'm taking Jake Paul via stoppage. Let me know your thoughts on this extravaganza. Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson. Do you think the fight should happen? Are you excited about it? I know everyone's going to watch it, whether you like it or not, right? Let me know your thoughts on who's going to win, how, and where does Jake Paul go from here? Obviously, if he loses, that kind of complicates matters. But if he beats Mike Tyson, let's say he beats Mike Tyson in some sort of a non-dramatic knockout, like the ref stops it, but Mike Tyson isn't like badly hurt. Another possibility is injury. I think Mike Tyson could move around. He could hurt his knee. A lot of things could go wrong for a 58-year-old trying to box. Yeah. Let me know your thoughts on this one in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.